It's really a matter of the fear factor, a loss of investor confidence because of the instability that exists within the Eurozone right now. People really have not seen the bottom yet. They don't see a strategy for dealing with the whole mess around the euro. The Greek debt overhang, the fact that there's problems in Spain, Italy, Portugal. And so it's a matter of fear and uncertainty from not having a clear strategy for dealing with this. And there's a ripple effect through the banking system and through global trade, and that affects all of us. So that's really what's taking, I said that it's taking about 1% of GDP growth out of the world economy, and that's a good ballpark estimate of the impact of a loss of confidence. Well, first of all, the dollar is very closely correlated to global commodity prices, particularly oil prices. So we start there. Our view is that oil at about $100 a barrel is the new normal. Even when there's been slowdowns, oil prices have maintained that kind of broad band. And therefore, if you think oil is going to be a fairly strongly priced commodity, that means the dollar is going to be a strong currency. So we think the dollar more or less at par is a reasonable forecast for a very long time to come. It trades within a band over the course of the year. So in the last year, the dollar's gone between $1.04 as a high and probably 95.5, 96 cents as a low. But even today, it's back at par and slightly beyond without really robust growth. So that leads us to believe that that's kind of the normal structural positioning for the dollar now. And that means that we have to adapt to it. We can't rely upon the dollar to be a soft currency to make us competitive anymore. And that affects everybody in our economy. As a major export sector, absolutely beef producers are affected by that. They've probably lost in Canadian dollar terms up to a quarter of their export revenue by the dollar rising from 65, 68 cents a decade ago up to par. But unfortunately, there's no magic way to drive the dollar back down in value. You can't do it without really serious intervention. And it's clear that neither the federal government nor the Bank of Canada are going to do those things. So it's up to us to adapt to the dollar as a strong currency. Well, I think we bought a bit of time before rates start to rise. Mark Carney is worried about European events. He's mindful of a very weak recovery in the U.S. And so the bank has moderated the view a little bit. The rates probably will not rise until the first part of next year. So I have a bit of time, but rates are going to rise. There's going to be higher rates at the short end, higher rates at the long end. People have to sort of prepare for that now. The danger is a lot of us have taken on more debt than we can actually afford with normal interest rates. And that's maybe the biggest risk factor for sustaining the Canadian recovery, is that rates will rise at some point, starting maybe first quarter, second quarter of 2013, and then keep rising. And that'll start eating into people's ability to invest and consume as they pay more for debt. Well, we've pulled back our growth forecast a little bit because of internal adjustment, governments having plans to balance the books and taking stimulus out of the economy, and that challenging external environment. But it's also very sustainable. So we have good but not great growth, but on a fairly sustainable basis, and we're dealing with any imbalances. So overall, we give Canada pretty high grades compared to others. I wish growth were stronger. To get there, you'd have to have more robust recovery in the U.S. and a normalization of events in Europe. I said that there's really two structural forces. When you set aside all the current events and where we are in the business cycle, there's two big structural factors affecting Canada. One's a strong dollar, we talked about that. The second is the fact that we're now seeing the impact of aging demographics playing through the labor force. The baby boomers are getting ready to retire. We're going to see much slower population growth and therefore labor force growth over the next 20 years. And that flows right into the capacity of the economy to grow. So, Canada's growth potential is going to fall by about a percentage point over the next decade, from a world of 3% growth to a world of 2% growth. And the question is, what are we going to do at that stage? Are we going to up the immigration numbers, do things to be more innovative and boost productivity, or just kind of go with the flow and let it happen? We've got a really crappy track record, frankly. Canada has been an underperformer in productivity for about 25 years now. And we're a laggard on innovations. We do a whole variety of reports at the Conference Board looking at both, and our track record is not great. So this is a bit of a change point, or almost like an inflection point for Canada. Are we prepared to step up and become an innovation nation, be much more creative in how we do things? Or are we going to keep doing things the way we've done in the past and suffer the consequences, frankly? We think the recovery is not robust, but it's sustainable, and we're seeing more and more positive news on a variety of fronts. So, for example, we think the U.S. has hit the bottom on the housing market. You're going to see a recovery in housing starts and purchases, hopefully in prices, over the next year. That's a good factor because that'll mean people feeling a bit better about their retirement savings, about their future. We think the labor market's turning the corner where we're seeing good but not great numbers in terms of job growth every month. So not enough to make a dent in the unemployment rate, but enough that you're not seeing a rise in unemployment now. People being absorbed slowly back into the workforce. And we just had a really good number in July when it comes to consumption growth, and that's an anchor part for the U.S. economy. But they're not really strong numbers. They're okay. They're enough to stabilize this situation, but the U.S. is still on a fairly long path before it gets back to a truly normal state. Well, I'd like them to understand that it is a challenging external environment. I talked a bit about structural change in the world too, the rise of emerging markets. So that's one piece. As the world going forward will not be the same as the world the way it was when we grew up. We can't assume that America and Europe and Japan will be the growth leaders in the world. Europe in particular is in a big mess, and they have to work their way through it. And I guess the other thing is there are structural forces at play in North America, both Canada and the U.S., when it comes to currency, when it comes to the labor force. And we have to adapt to that. We have to become much more innovative in how we manage our affairs and not be afraid of change. Be prepared to change your business model if that's what's required to stay in business on a going forward basis.